Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to tonight's presentation, an overview of care planning and caregiving. My name is Nadia Mercer, and I am the Executive Director of Greater Brookland Intergenerational Village. Many of you have probably heard of a village before or may be a member of our village. I see some members here tonight, or another village in Washington, D.C. Villages are nationwide, and they're hyper-local grassroots organizations that support older adults stay in their homes as long as possible by organizing community to socialize, know each other, and support each other. Greater Brookland Village is an intergenerational village. So we have members ranging from in their 30s up into their mid 80s. But we always need to look outside of our scope of what we can do to make sure that we're also reaching other service providers that can help add value and benefit and cover our needs when the village can't support our members fully. And we want to keep learning and preparing for our future. So that's why we're here tonight. We are here with aging consultants that have their own consulting business called Silver Advocate. And we're going to hear from Catherine Boomer and Christiana Waldrop for this hour-long presentation about what we should be thinking about as we plan for our future. So this is a general overview, but I'm really hoping that everybody leaves with some really good questions that they can start talking to their family or their community about, so that we have a plan before it's crisis mode. We can be as prepared for the unexpected as possible. Again, this is an hour long. We'll have time for questions at the end, so please keep yourself on mute, and I will turn it over to our guests.
Thank you very much, Nadia, and thank you to the DC Villages for hosting tonight's presentation. And thank you especially to all of you for joining us and your interest in the Silver Advocate approach to aging. I'm going to go ahead and share the slide presentation. My colleague Prasanna and I are going to take turns talking about things and sharing our experiences, and I would appreciate you using the follow-up time for questions. So I will start my screen share. All right, I think we're rolling. Prasanna, is this up? Everybody seeing this?
Yep.
Excellent, thank you. So again, thank you to everyone for being here and for being interested in the Silver Advocate approach to aging. As children, we rely upon our caregivers to make decisions and to create opportunities for us to be happy, healthy, and safe. For most of our adult life, we are solely responsible for our safety, our health, and our happiness. These three concepts serve as the foundation of the Silver Advocate approach. I'm Catherine Boomer. I'm the founder of Silver Advocate. I've been crafting and creating this consulting business since 2016. I first had the idea after I lost both my parents within 6 months of one another. I had been with them for 4 years prior as their primary care manager. I'd moved home in 2013 to live with my parents. My father had fallen and became reliant upon a wheelchair and needed 24/7 help. Although I had seen signs of their gradual decline in managing everyday skills and had mentioned it to my 4 siblings, it wasn't until this event that the family entered aging crisis overdrive. We were an incredibly close-knit family, the kind where we would seek each other out for friendship and for fun. I considered my siblings my best friends. I'm now estranged from one of my brothers and have a strained relationship with one of my sisters. Thankfully, I am still very close with 2 siblings. My family system was structured in such a way that my father was omnipotent. He took care of everyone and everything. But when the leader can no longer lead, the cracks in the system are amplified. Avoiding difficult conversations does not make them go away, nor does it make them easier. Had I created space to have these difficult conversations, then I wouldn't be here talking to all of you. Silver Advocate is your trusted resource for guidance on the aging path. Silver Advocate addresses an emerging challenge in the aging industry, a need for informed, experienced, and compassionate guidance outside the typical conversations. We meet you in the spaces between traditional medical, legal, and financial decisions to create a more comprehensive aging plan. Through intentional conversations and guided education, Silver Advocate believes in supporting your health, happiness, and safety in all aspects of your life. Prasanna and I connected when I moved to DC in 2017. When I first met Prasanna, she was beginning the journey with her parents I had just completed with mine. As she walked that path, I saw how determined she was to create something larger out of her experience. I was grateful for her willingness to be open about her challenges and allow me to process my reflections on my experience while helping her. We both realized we could help so many others avoid some of the difficulties we faced. We are a team of compassionate professionals inspired to help others live well and age well. What we do. Silver Advocate has 4 pillars of support: aging planning, family caregiver coaching, elder advocacy and family mediation, end-of-life planning and education. Throughout this presentation, we will highlight each of these pillars and go into more detail about how they can support you.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here tonight. I'm Prasanna Waldrop, and I appreciate your interest in this very important topic. Just briefly, my journey involved caring for 2 parents who live 3,000 miles apart from one another, and both of whom suffer from dementia. So in my experience, nobody hands you a pamphlet and says your parent is experiencing cognitive decline. I had to figure this out, and it's a slow, daunting, emotional process that evokes deeply upsetting and life-changing realizations. I'll get into more of that later, but first let's consider this slide. I love this illustration because it gives a quick snapshot of many aspects of life that impact aging planning. It's likely that when you think about each of these things, an emotional response gets triggered. Ignoring the elephant doesn't make it disappear. So how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. Next slide, please.
Our first pillar is aging planning. We help you create a plan for your future care before you need it. We confirm the nuts and bolts aspect of your planning, and we help you assess your current life with an eye towards intentional aging. Aging planning is more than just a will and an advanced directive. Comprehensive planning takes into account a variety of scenarios to help you create solutions before there are problems. A systems-based approach is most effective, and talking through the what-ifs in your life will help you better live in the present by planning for the future.
So we're just going to give you a couple of very basic definitions to start off with so that you have it as we go forward. So care planning is very obvious. It's considering all the possible scenarios for future care needs. Now, the truth is nobody can predict the future, and there are always going to be flaws in the plan, but having a plan at all puts you way ahead of the game. So first, in the following slides, we're gonna share some different scenarios and instances where lack of planning can have a lasting impact. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is just an overall kind of demographic issue, but seniors are growing at the harsh reality is that there are simply not enough programs or trained workers to provide all the help that the ever-increasing population will need. The individuals and families who recognize this and decide to prepare themselves as best they can are far more likely to be sufficiently organized and educated that they can take advantage of the resources that are available in their area. It's important to understand that different parts of the country have different levels of support. Cities generally have more programs to assist seniors than rural areas do. Next slide, please. So here's the problem. Legal authority to help a loved one pay their bills or make medical decisions when the person can't speak for himself. So the overall solution, the senior needs to determine who they trust and who is available and willing to assume these roles of legal responsibility. Preparing ahead and setting in place legal agreements such as the healthcare power of attorney and financial power of attorney goes a long way towards creating a useful backup plan in case you or your loved one becomes unable to manage their affairs. Taking concrete steps mandates conversations that can be emotional for both sides. Clear-headed practical strategies are required. It is important to acknowledge that these roles involve both trust and a significant time commitment on the part of the person who holds the POA. Not everyone is well suited for these responsibilities, and a realistic appreciation for the various personalities that are involved is key to making smart choices, no matter how awkward it may feel at the time. For example, my mom initially had both my brother and me listed as co-POAs. In many families that can work, but not in mine. I chose to tell my mother that she needed to choose between us and name only one because we simply differed on too many things. It was pointless to appoint us both because there would be nonstop arguments. My mom didn't want to choose, but I explained that I was unwilling to accept the role if it was to be shared. I didn't want to spend the next 10 years arguing with my brother. It was either him or me. I'm so glad I insisted on this. It's made the decision-making a lot more straightforward. Next slide, please. Now, let's shift and look at a different sort of problem. You notice things slipping in your parents' life, whether it's a messy house, an untended yard, bills are unpaid. Well, what's the solution? The truth of the matter is changes in behavior or personality can signal serious problems that demand concrete steps. It is awkward. It's a weird feeling, for adult children to suddenly realize that maybe mom or dad isn't up to managing the house anymore. It is awkward to take charge of their affairs, and doing so is usually met with righteous indignation by the senior. Nobody relishes the prospect of admitting that they are no longer up to the job. It is important for potential caregivers to be sensitive to the loss that their loved ones feel at the prospect of no longer being able to manage their affairs. Many individuals will never admit or recognize that a problem exists. Simultaneously, it is often uncomfortable, overwhelming, and inconvenient for the potential caregiver to face the fact that their loved one now needs more help. Next slide, please. Problem. The senior is not willing to appoint anyone to make decisions for him. If he gets to that point, he just won't do it. The solution, by thinking through the possible outcomes, the senior is saving his family enormous stress and grief by expressing what he wants versus conflicting opinions of various relatives. Thinking about our possible demise or incapacity is uncomfortable for all of us, particularly in a society like ours where folks pride themselves on their independence. But denial or kicking the can down the road is disastrous when a crisis strikes. One way to address this issue is to set forth a document known as an advance directive. This is a legal document that should be given to your various doctors so that if you are hospitalized, it spells out what you want to have happen. Another strategy is to make the tough call and discuss this with a few close, trusted relatives or friends, asking them if they would be willing to assume such responsibility. Not everyone has the bandwidth to do so. It is critical for both parties to be candid about expectations and abilities, since when a crisis occurs, everything moves much faster and is 10 times more intense. You need someone you can both trust to do the best for you and that they can handle the pressure. Next slide, please. Problem. Swooping is not helping. Solution. Clear communication about responsibilities and expectations. Now, swooping is a term of art within the aging world. It is when an adult child shows up for 24 to 48 hours with a list of 20 chores they intend to hammer through while the parents dig in their heels and refuse to cooperate. I am guilty of swooping myself more than once. I thought I could come in, spend a few days with my mom, organizing things, take her to the doctor, set up pill boxes, put reminder notes around the kitchen. It did not work. Seniors operate on an entirely different time frame than their adult kids. What is most important is that they feel in control of their own lives, and all the time management skills in the world will not change this. The adult child has to practice sensitivity and patience when approaching these topics. It is critical to move at their pace and not yours. Next slide, please. Okay, so what issues may impact planning when you're looking at the variables? Personal health, your support system, finances, family relationships, and the ability to be self-aware. So as you start thinking about planning for yourself or a loved one, the strategies are directly influenced by your specific situation. This includes your health, cognition, who or what organizations are available to help out, how much money you have, and your realistic assessment of these factors. As your circumstances change, your plan should flex as well. There is no one size fits all, and good planning requires us to revisit it from time to time to see if it still serves us. No plan is perfect, but any plan can make a huge difference down the road. While we regularly prepare for the arrival of a new baby, when it comes to seniors, we often don't know where to start. Assessing all the details of another person's life is hard and complicated. It is far easier and more convenient to assume that we or our loved ones will always be self-sufficient and independent, passing away peacefully in our sleep. I wish. Hope is not a plan. The truth is, we often underestimate the toll that age-related illnesses and disabilities can take on a person's mental, physical, and emotional health. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the vulnerabilities of our aging population and the challenges that caregivers face in our socially distanced world. According to a recent AARP survey, 80% of adults believe they will be responsible for providing care for a family member as they age. Yet only 25% have actually discussed their wishes and preferences with their loved ones. The consequences of this lack of preparation can be devastating. Families may find themselves struggling to navigate the complex healthcare system, dealing with unexpected financial burdens, and trying to provide care without the necessary resources and support. One of the biggest challenges is that many families simply don't know where to turn for help. The healthcare system is complex and difficult to navigate, and many families are unaware of the resources and services that are available to them. Fortunately, the villages are a prime resource that you already know about. While they can't solve every problem, it's wonderful to have this community to fall back on. To address this crisis, we need to start talking about aging and planning, just as we plan for a wedding. Seniors should have conversations with their trusted loved ones about their wishes and preferences for care, and develop a care plan that includes both medical and non-medical needs. At the same time, caregivers should think carefully about what they can and cannot reasonably provide. This can be a huge time-consuming responsibility with a lot of emotional drain. Nearly 40% of family caregivers report experiencing high levels of stress and burnout, and many struggle to balance their caregiving responsibilities with work, family, and other obligations. Caregivers often make significant sacrifices in their own lives, including serious financial strain, social isolation, and compromised health. It's crucial to address the larger issue of caregiving as a public health concern, with policies and funding that recognize and support the vital role of caregivers in our society. One of the most significant challenges facing caregivers of aging seniors is the burden of responsibility falling on one person, often while adult siblings or other family members carry on with their lives. This can create a sense of resentment and isolation for the primary caregiver, who may feel that they are shouldering an unfair burden. Next slide, please. Okay, so now that we've covered what a plan can accomplish, let's examine the whys. Why do we plan? Sense of control, to avoid surprises. The realization of limited resources. We want to minimize the chance of last-minute drama and minimize stress for all. Rarely does life work out according to plan. The truth is there is never a perfect solution, but planning helps reduce the stress experienced during a crisis. Knowing that you have thought through the various options and have an idea of who does what goes a long way towards alleviating chaos and anxiety. Yes, it may involve facing inconvenient truths and having awkward conversations, but the payoff down the line is huge.
Family caregiver coaching. Our pillar of support in family caregiver coaching can help the caregiver identify and manage stress. We can help them develop healthy coping mechanisms and strategies, and we can help them build a support network for the caregiver and the care recipient. Who is caring for you? Many caregivers experience compassion fatigue. Feelings of overwhelm and frustration can lead to a deep exhaustion. Stress levels rise as we try to juggle our own responsibilities while navigating the ever-changing responsibilities of caring for an elder. I mentioned in my introduction how I'm now estranged from one of my brothers and have a strained relationship with my sister, and that is a direct result of the 4 years I spent caring for my parents, and it was a stress on the entire family. I'm just recovering from that time. It feels like, even though my parents have been gone for about 5 or 6 years. So it's really important to understand the stress that a family caregiver can go under, and realize that it's more than just caring for their elder. There's an emotional aspect to it and an impact on the system.
Okay, so this is another basic term, caregiving, and these are the actions taken by one person to support and benefit another. Next slide, please. So we're going to review a couple more scenarios that kind of reflect some of the caregiving bumps in the road. Next slide, please. Problem. My parents refuse help from a stranger. Won't let anybody in, will not let somebody help them. The solution. The family needs to come together and figure out ways to provide respite care for the primary caregiver. Over and over, I hear from clients and friends how their loved ones refuse to let anyone in the house to help them. It certainly was the case for my parents, which resulted in me being the one who was left to manage the mess that they unknowingly created. I felt helpless and I felt as though I had no choice other than leaving them to stew in their own mess, which I was unwilling to do. And it caused me enormous anxiety and feelings of overwhelm. The truth of the matter is that my folks didn't realize the huge impact all this was having on me. Rather, they interpreted my actions as, quote, taking over or being bossy. It was a nightmare. Caregiver burnout is real and can stress every relationship, whether that is at work, marriage, or personal health. By nature, most caregivers always go the extra mile, but they do so at the peril of their own sanity and resilience. Here are a few additional examples of real life problems. I bet you all can think of others you've had to deal with. These aren't on the slide. So, number one, my parents refuse to let anyone in the house to help them, and I can't spend every weekend over there running errands and dealing with them. Number two, my loved one forgets to take her medications, even though I set it all up for her. I don't know what to do and I worry. Number three, I don't want to burden my nephew when he's got his own family to worry about. I don't like going to the doctor anyway. I'm fine. My husband is getting more forgetful, but he yells at me when I try to remind him. He refuses to take a shower and forgot to bring the groceries in from the car, so they spoiled. Next slide.
Elder-focused family mediation is our third pillar of support. Often I find that in family systems where the difficult conversations haven't taken place, when the crisis arises, that's when it's an important time to call in an elder-focused family mediator. It was something I wish my family had had, and one of the driving reasons that I sought to get training as a mediator. Family mediation provides a peaceful way to resolve conflicts, and mediators have helped families communicate effectively and make decisions together. Every family has a unique set of qualities and patterns of behavior. Often, we don't know how we will manage a crisis until we are in one. Life transitions can be a challenge even in the best of times. In the always changing landscape of aging, it can be overwhelming to manage all of the details, and things invariably fall through the cracks. Here are some examples when it may serve you to include a trained, elder-focused mediator. Problem: sibling miscommunication leads to confusion and resentment. Solution: clear communication about expectations and responsibilities. Every family is similar in that every family is a system. A family does not necessarily mean the traditional nuclear family. Any relationship creates a system. For efficiency, I use system to encompass all manners of relationships: work, family, social, etc. All systems have predictable operational patterns. Each member of the system has a clearly defined role. These roles are dependent upon one another to keep the system operating. As people grow, evolve, and change, the system should change to reflect that. However, often in times of crisis, people in the system tend to revert back to their earlier roles. This regression results in emotional reactions instead of functional responses. In the case of siblings here, assumptions were made. Assumptions can be about many things, including what may be best for the elder, who may be best suited for a certain task, and what steps to take in managing a crisis. If difficult conversations have not taken place prior to a crisis, then elder-focused family mediation can help reorient the system and get it back on track. End-of-life education and planning is our fourth pillar of support. And we do this through values-based end-of-life education, heart-centered end-of-life planning, and we help you become familiar and comfortable with the language of aging, death, and dying. It's the reality of our mortality. Talking about death is scary. Our society values youth, vitality, and wellness. We have become disconnected from our mortality and have devalued the gift of aging. Silver Advocate believes that you can live more fully in the present by planning for the end. Through values-based end-of-life education and intentional conversations, Silver Advocate will guide you to create a meaningful end-of-life plan and a lasting legacy. I'm a trained and licensed Willow end-of-life educator. I can guide you through a thoughtfully designed series of values-driven conversations and exercises developed to help you clarify your wishes and define your legacy. Willow is changing the conversation around death and dying to include life and living. It's the one thing in life we're certain of, yet most people do everything in their power to avoid talking about it, let alone preparing for it. The vast majority of people don't have any documents in place because they live in a state of death denial rather than death acceptance. While public institutions offer many advanced care planning resources, their questionnaires, forms, and public education efforts are not yet working. End-of-life planning is a phrase that represents the broad concept of planning ahead for the unpredictability of life and the inevitability of death. Getting clear and communicating your priorities and wishes about your health and your personal care, your legacy and your after-death care, as well as your finances and how you'll be remembered, can go a long way toward creating peace of mind, reducing anxiety, regret, and conflict. Willow offers 10 workshops, including materials guiding you to think about and do things you may never have done or thought about before. While getting your affairs in order, Willow invites you to reflect on the meaning of your life, who you are, what you stand for, and how you wish to be remembered. This checklist helps to bring clarity to the various ways you can find peace of mind as you create your own comprehensive aging plan. I'm sorry if it's a little blurry, but it's called the Reality of Our Mortality Planning Checklist. And it's broken down into 3 areas: a foundational area, making sense of life and death, exploring values, hopes, and fears and beliefs, grieving and healing, understanding and working through your own grieving process from past losses, and writing things called legacy love letters and heart wills, which is a really wonderful exercise in reflecting upon your values. Middle ground here is called making choices about your departure directions, your health, your personal care wishes and decision-making, your financial and legal authority. And the final aspect is clearing the way, organizing and decoding your unfinished business and courageous conversations. Here's another handout from the Willow workshops. This slide shows a worksheet, and there's 6 questions suggesting that you think about who and what matters most. If you knew you had limited time to live, what would you want to do? How and with whom would you spend your time? With whom do you need to write a relationship, and what would be required of you to do this? When you die, how will your absence affect the people, places, and things in your world? If the people you love were to remember 3 things about you, what would you want them to remember? When in your life have you felt most alive or most like yourself? How will your legacy help make the world a better place? Intentional conversations around aging create functional responses to crises. Relying on hope triggers emotional reactions.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here a little bit with just some statistics and some overview, but this slide presents some demographic context to our presentation. While each person's situation and needs are unique, there are general patterns that help inform what is likely to happen. The average age of death in 1900 was 47 years old. In 2023, the average age of death has risen to 79. We've close to doubled life expectancy in this country. Social Security and Medicare are the fastest growing segments of the federal budget. When Social Security was established in 1935, the retirement age was 65, and the average age of death was 61, which means the program was not designed to provide long-term support to recipients. When you look at, that's fine. Okay, while nobody can predict the future, advanced planning can make age-related challenges a lot easier to manage. If the goal is to prepare for a secure, predictable life as we age, 2 key activities are for the senior to figure out what is most important to them in terms of quality of life, and the caregiver to be clear on how much and what support they can provide. This slide here is kind of a visual snapshot of the overall goals and values and boundaries and backup plan. It's a different approach to the elephant illustration that you saw early on in the presentation. There are so many different threads that get impacted when we start thinking about these topics. And so you pull on one thread and the fabric bunches up somewhere else. It's just something to kind of coalesce all the different things that you have to grapple with when you're looking at this overall topic. Next slide, please.
So the takeaway, Chrisana and I are going to share some resources, things to get you thinking, talking, and hopefully planning.
So here's just a single slide with important documents that everybody should have. An advance directive is something that any individual, it doesn't matter what age you are, but any individual should have that expresses what their preferences are if they can no longer speak for themselves in the hospital. You know, do you want to be on life support? Do you want to be intubated? Do you not want to have, there are things called DNRs, do not resuscitate. And that's a preference. Both my parents have that, where they do not want any interaction by medical professionals if they should have a crisis. There's the will. There's the revocable trust. There's the medical power of attorney and financial power of attorney, and a summary of accounts and passwords. There are lots of other documents that are important, and it's important for everyone to understand that you can always revisit every single one of these documents. If you want to change your mind about what you want the doctors to do or who you want to be able to sign checks on your behalf, you can change that. So it's not as though it's a one and done, but having these things already in place makes everything easier down the road. Next slide.
So here's a very short list of some free resources. There are so many resources out there that I've stopped listing them, but AARP is a great resource. There's several different programs through Staying Home or Mom at Home or something like that. But these are the ones that I feel are probably the best in terms of accessibility. The Conversation Project is a really wonderful program, and it has wonderful resources. Diane Sawyer did an interview with the founders, and it has some really impactful information on there. 5 Wishes, I think perhaps there's been presentations on 5 Wishes. I haven't gone too deep in it, but I know people really like the 5 Wishes program. End of Life Washington is something that I have come across, and I've really valued its ability to take the nuts and bolts aspect of whole life planning and take it a little bit deeper. It reminds me a little bit of the book Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. I read that after caring for my parents, and it really helped guide me in terms of my approach to understanding how to live your best life, really. I mentioned the Willow End of Life Education. There is a store on that website with a lot of free resources if you want to start looking into this for yourself. And I'm drawn to it because I think it's very beautiful, and it's colorful, and it's accessible, and it's kind of approachable. The last free resource is a gal named Carol Marek. I have been working with her a little bit. She focuses on solo agers and has workshops and questionnaires and booklets, and I think she has groups. So that's a really wonderful resource for people who are solo agers.
And lastly, we wanted to give you guys some takeaway questions just to get you to start thinking about this situation. This isn't anything that necessarily comes naturally, but once you start thinking about these issues, you can see how helpful it could be to at least have thought it through. And again, we recognize, Catherine and I recognize, we're throwing a lot of information at you all. And it wouldn't be a surprise. I mean, I expect 90% of it would go out of my head because there's so many free resources. There are so many books that you can read. And when I started on this journey, you know, I read the books, but it was like Greek. I had no idea what any of it meant. I could read the words, but until I did it, I simply didn't know. And starting with questions just to ask yourself privately in the space, the quiet space of your own heart, you know, what if my vision or arthritis gets so bad that I can't cook for myself? If I fall down in the bathroom, who do I call to help me? What if I get hospitalized? Who will feed the cat? Who will pick up my prescriptions and take out my trash? Who could I stay with if I can't go home? And so you all will have other questions that you'll want to ask yourself, but I find in my experience that starting just in the privacy of my own head to ask a couple of these things, and I found it easier to write down some of the answers because my thoughts got into so much of a jumble, but it's the first step you can take. And I think between, you know, the different resources that Khaki set out and these questions and the basic documents are a very good kind of three structure table to start with. So that's what I have to say about that.
And here's our favorite slide. Hope is not a plan. Thank you for letting us share our stories. Please reach out if you need guidance.
Okay, that slide was quick with your contact information, so I'm
Oh,
sure
sorry.
not everybody got that. But yeah, maybe you could put it up one more time if people need to write that down. Okay, I'll also share this with everyone via email who registered. Now I know some people on here did not register. So I won't have your email to send it to you unless you email me at Nadia, Nadia, at brooklandvillage.org. Then you will be on my list. I did put that in the chat. We have some time for questions, about 15 minutes or a little bit more for anyone who wants to. I know our guests, our speakers are willing to stay till 8:15 if we have enough questions to take us that far. Okay. I think you can take the slide down now, Catherine. Thank you. And then I see Electra Elliott has their hand up.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Guys, thank you so much for the presentation. Really enjoyed that. I wanted to know something. I love this idea of the villages. Is there such a thing in Texas or Houston, if anybody knows?
Most likely there is.
Oh.
Let me do a quick search for you and I'll let you know in a minute.
The villages, for those who don't know, was a concept that started in Boston about 25 years ago. And it was designed to provide both social opportunities, but also to support people to age in place. So if you join by membership and they'll have activities, but they also can help one another through volunteerism in terms of driving to the doctor or whatever, different things like that. And so it's a very nice way for people to feel that they've got some community who are already putting their hand up to say, I'm willing to help. So but it's been spreading across the country, and the Washington, D.C. area has a particularly robust group of villages, but they're all over the country. I expect that there's some in Houston.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
Also,
it's
just
kind of
as a
hard to
note,
search for because like you get a lot of
Right.
result.
The village of River Oaks or the village of this or that. Yeah.
I came across a map when I searched this organization, and you could find it showed the US map, and it had little markers where the villages were. Also, just as a note, if people have, I meant to create a survey, but if people have feedback, ideas, responses about the information we shared, how we shared it, feelings that were brought up, I'm happy to hear those now or share them with Nadia, and you could email them to us. But yeah, it would be nice to hear what people thought.
Yeah, I will definitely send up a post survey.
Great.
Yeah, I'm looking.
I have a question. I'm Christy Horton. So I'm curious, when you begin working with an individual or a family, do you tend to work with them for a period of time and then on an as needed basis, or how do you structure it? Is it for, a decade, 2 decades, or is it, how does it work exactly?
Yeah. Do you want to take this? Or you want me to, Prasanna?
Kathy, it's fine. You go ahead.
Ultimately, it just depends upon the family, right? So in the initial interview, we sort of figure out where you are and where you'd like to be. We have a few different models for working with us, and it can be on an as needed basis. There's also, if it's something that is a topic, an issue, a challenge that is obviously finite, you may decide just to engage us for a month. We also have a 3-month engagement, and there's different levels of support in there too, in terms of texting, phone calls, emails, check-ins. But it really is dependent upon who that family is and what they need. Certainly it's I have to be very careful, though I have a background in education and as a coach, and Chrisana has a legal background. We're not lawyers, we're not doctors, we are not therapists. So we're very mindful of the lane that we occupy. But I think it's a very important lane to support you. So if something scoots over into a medical lane or a mental health lane, we could certainly advise you to seek more professional support there. But that's sort of a long way of saying that there's no hard and fast rule about the support we offer, and it really is a case-by-case basis because things change, things evolve.
Christine, if I could just jump in. So initially, just the way we kind of offer our services on an hourly basis, but there's an expectation that there's a minimum number of hours because nothing gets solved in one. But we start out with 3 hours because you may not need to talk to me initially for a whole hour, but over the course of, I don't know, going through your mother's house and trying to figure out the different bank accounts and how do I approach mom about this when she's not paying the bills? That kind of coaching, that kind of brainstorming to work with somebody who's already been through it and can anticipate a lot of those things. It's that kind of tailored support that's basically done kind of on an hourly basis, but it's not a one and done. It's not like you're going to go in for 1 hour and then that'll be the end. I mean, and the way we work is we offer a free half-hour consultation to begin with so that everybody gets to kind of suss out, does it seem like it would be a workable situation? And some clients say yes, and other interested parties don't. And that's how any of it goes. But it's basically, that's at least the initial way it's been working out.
Great, thank you.
I did find a village in Houston, Electra. I put it in the chat. It's called Jersey. Okay. Oh, okay. I can email it to you as well. And I did find a map of other villages in the country. That I can put in the chat as well.
I'm going to say one other thing, just that's very personal about my journey through this aging process, particularly with my parents. It's been probably the hardest thing I've ever done, but I have grown so much. And if someone had told me ahead of time what was involved with the level of caregiving, particularly given that both of my parents are have got cognitive decline, I'm sure I would not have been brave enough to take this on. But when you hear, and I wouldn't have said this 3 years ago because I would have been too much in the maelstrom. But when you hear people say it's an honor and a privilege to help people through this journey, there is a lot to be said for that. There can be a lot of unexpected insights into yourself, into your relationships with your loved ones. You can feel very, very proud of what you've done because you are seeing people, in many respects at their most vulnerable. And there are always going to be people, fortunately, who are going to be hale and hearty until their last breath. But hope is not a plan. And it certainly has made me more aware of how I spend my time.
Do we have any other questions? Thoughts, shares?
I do.
Mhm.
Will you be, so I found out about this just like 2 hours ago. Are you planning to do more of these presentations? I know this is with the villages, but I'd be curious to hear more, like focused on just the power of attorney, or I don't know, how to talk to your brother or whatever.
Mhm.
That's a great idea. And I think Prasanna and I would definitely be open to that. And that's the kind of feedback we need. We're still, much of our business has been word of mouth through our social network. And we are just starting to reach out through social media and through workshops. My Willow end of life education, as I mentioned, there's 10 workshops that I offer, and I'll do those in person and also virtually. But we will address the need that's out there. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, and that's the benefit of having kind of this small consulting business, we're friends and we came together to share our experiences and to help others avoid a lot of the drama that we have both been through. I mean, we could be here all night telling stories about things, but so yeah, if there's anything that we can do to help make it easier for other people, we will do it. So, if Nadia wants, you got our information, I think. So,
Yeah, I will definitely, as a network of villages in DC, we often share resources and presentations about things that you might want to know about and start thinking about as you get older. And we did one on estate planning recently, and that's recorded. So I can share with you the recording on our YouTube page. And if I add you to our newsletter, if you're okay with that, then you'll be informed of other ones in the future. Mm-hmm.
It's such a big topic that Catherine and I did not want to overwhelm anybody. And again, this is the 30,000 feet view. We could dive deep just into, dealing with getting rid of somebody's stuff, which is a very emotional, hard thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of stuff comes up as a result of that. And so, I mean, any of these could go on for days, as Catherine was saying. I mean, I could talk family dysfunction till you're blue in the face. No problem. I got that one covered. So, but at any rate, well, thank you all for your, attention and for being interested and for sticking it out.
Just want to pause for any more questions. Oh, I see Laura. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this has been very interesting. I was wondering, I've known a couple of people who've utilized a geriatric care manager to help them with this planning. Is that similar to what you all do? It seems like you cover a lot of different aspects of what this process is like, but I'm wondering what that role is. It seemed maybe more nuts and bolts type of stuff, or
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, when my parents started, I enrolled in a geriatric care management program with the University of Florida. So the geriatric care managers are a critical component of it, but they are more hands-on. What Silver Advocate is offering is more coaching and strategy of how to do it, and we can help you figure out from anywhere in the country. Okay, I need to figure out about somebody who can, get my father into a daycare program, that kind of thing. The geriatric care manager would know the site specific resources, but we could help lay out the blueprint. And the other aspect is, my brother's not helping and I don't know what to do. Well, that crosses all state boundaries, right? So, but the geriatric care managers are absolutely, I hired one when I was doing with both of my parents. It was just incredibly helpful because they do know the local resources.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Chrisana. We really appreciate your time and your sharing your knowledge.
Thank you. I
Thank
really
you for
appreciate
listening.
that. Thanks very much. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Good evening.